Hi, everybody, and welcome to another exciting edition of TNM Unplugged podcast. Today, we have an amazing topic that I would love to dive into immediately. It's you and AI, you and artificial intelligence. This is one of the topics that is really close to my heart. I wanted to talk about it for a very long time because I go around and I connect to people, and some people are really afraid of it. They have this response, oh my God, what's really going on with AI right now? Some people are worried about it. They think about, we should be worried about this domination and takeover of AI. And some people are really, really excited by it because they really want to create this most amazing relationship with the AI. So this topic is hot. It's really fun. It's really exciting. And today with me, I have this wonderful team of collaborators and co-creators who have been working with the program that we call You and AI in past few months. And they've been focusing on AI and business environment. They also explore AI and decision making. And then also they've looked deeper into AI and dilemmas. So we'll talk about this program. We'll talk about the research around AI. I just want to mention they're not experts in AI, just to preempt that. They're not tech gurus and people from different organizations who are going to give you technical understanding how the AI works. But they're coaches, trainers, collaborators, psychologists who are looking into relationship that we need to develop with AI and how to create the most powerful bond so that AI can be our ally, our friend, and something that works alongside with us to support us going forward in our human journey. So today I have with me Judith Eberl. I always struggle with her name. Adriana Strnad and Damian Fearns, who are joining us this lovely conversation around artificial intelligence and how we're going to live and learn and grow with artificial intelligence. So let's start with Judith. Judith, welcome.
Thank you, Zoran.
So tell us a little bit more about the program in itself. Let's start from that. What is the aim of this program and why do you believe it's really relevant to the leaders nowadays?
Yes, with the program, which is called You and AI, as you mentioned, we really want to stimulate curiosity. Artificial intelligence is a huge topic. It's on the minds of most of the people. But ultimately, the purpose of the program is to help individuals and leaders in organizations reflect about what is the impact of AI on us as individuals first, because we are living in the midst of it. What is the impact on organizations and on society in general? So this is why we have decided to look at it from different perspectives so that we really can zoom on how AI is shaping the business environment, how is it changing the way we make decisions, and what new dilemmas it brings up.
Yes, great. So from your perspective, that's the entry points to the program. And I'm thinking a lot about leaders who are listening to this podcast and people who are listening to this podcast. They will immediately come up with the question, okay, how is AI really impacting business environment? What would you say to this, just from top of your mind?
For sure, there has been a big boom in terms of applying AI in businesses, particularly over the last few years. So we can see there are no new technologies which are emerging. Organizations are moving into integrating AI in multiple processes within their organizations. So I would say that in a lot of organizations, it is already a reality. The question is, where is it good to use AI? Where should we use it more? And where should we be careful in using AI?
I love how you said, where would you use it more? Where do we need to be cautious and careful? And how do we develop this relationship? So for you, this is the aim of the program. So let's go to you, Adriana. When you think about you and AI and the program that we really want to introduce and get people to understand a little bit further, what is the aim of this program from your perspective? What is your angle and what was your contribution in creating this program?
So when you ask me this, maybe the first, I listened to you introducing the program and us as psychologists and engineers, and how we started developing this program and all the different kinds of relationships and reactions that people have to the introduction of AI. And I remember myself like 6 months ago when I was invited to collaborate on this program. And I was like, what does Alexa have to do, like with the work that I'm doing? The truth is that we work with leaders across the globe and we are passionate about leadership, and we are in the continuous exploration of like, what does it mean to be a leader that is relevant and that can lead his or her people, like from a place that leads them into a sustainable future. And that means being awake to pay attention and to notice what is happening in the world and what are the forces that are shaping our reality and our environment. And in that sense, AI is one of the key forces that is shaping the environment and the world that we live in, which means that as leaders, we have to be curious around how is it changing our world, how is it impacting our reality, and what does that mean for our leadership. And in that sense, entering this process of developing this program awakened my curiosity as well into raising my awareness around where is AI already here and part of my world, and I don't even think about it,
Yeah.
I let it in. And where do I need to be awake, like how is it going to be in the future?
And I also love what we're doing together because it's more like an awakening or awareness building and call for leaders on a global level to be agile enough to take into consideration, Adriana, what you beautifully say, all the forces that are shaping our world right now. And AI, it's definitely one of these forces that we cannot neglect. We really need to look into. So Damian, for you, I know that, you're getting into this conversation more from the perspective of human, human beingness, human in relationship to AI. Tell us a little bit more about your entry point into growing and developing this program.
Yes. Well, it's been an interest of mine for probably quite a long time, probably from childhood, really, in sort of trying to understand what does technology do around us. I think we're all of the generation that was around for a long time before the internet arrived, before all these technologies that we use arrived. And I think that my interest really in this is about trying to make sure that the human stays at the center of our systems and our organizations and our environment, our business environment overall, and sort of being aware as well of well, what are the risks of the human not being at the center of our systems and our environments in that way? What are the risks where we end up with artificial intelligence, optimizing the human for the market, if you like, rather than artificial intelligence helping us to optimize the future for the human. So that was really my kind of interest in that, is that kind of dichotomy, that kind of what's going on in the world and how do we make sense of that in the best possible way. And I think some of my main motivation in life in general is really about trying to understand human beings, what we are, how we work, what we're about. And in my experience so far in doing this, in developing leaders and working in psychotherapy and coaching, what's very evident is that the vast majority of human beings are still not really aware of how we work and what we're like as individuals and how we function.
Yeah.
And so here we are going into a world where artificial intelligence is, the next huge industrial, at the forefront of the next huge industrial revolution. And yet we still need to deepen our knowledge of who we are and how we are as well.
Yeah.
How do we relate to that? How do we connect with that in a meaningful way? Yeah.
So we don't even know ourselves, and then we need to get to know something else that is shaping us. Maybe
exactly that,
maybe the AI will help us get to know ourselves even more.
Well, there's a possibility that it could do that. Yes, it could do that to some degree. It could definitely be an aid towards that, and I'm interested in that. I'm interested in. I think the thing to remember about AI is that although it's so prevalent in our world already, and will become even more so, there's so much that we don't know. We don't know. And there's stuff that we think that we don't know, and this is the interesting thing, and this is what brought us to sort of work together on this program, was really the essence of saying, okay, well maybe we need to create something that we can connect in with leaders across these three elements, business environment, decision making, and looking at dilemmas of AI as well.
It's always great to hear about your personal journey in relationship to the program, because I'm sure that the audience is always curious to know how did we end up here, and why are we even opening these topics. And it's lovely to hear from all three of you to what really got you to this point right now. Now, I would love to shift this conversation to kind of broadening through the layers of what this program actually offers. So let's go with this AI and business environment. So why should leaders in business be engaged with AI technology, and why they should be interested? What is the motivation for the leaders who are listening to this program? So Judith, what would you say on that?
So first of all, with the program, we want to create a conversational space where there is an exchange of ideas, where there is an exchange of information. So I think as a starting point, it is important to get us an initial understanding about what AI is. And as we already said, it's a huge area, it's a huge field. So with the program, we will give some basic understanding and information about what AI is, but then we will actually connect it very much and actually start from the human being. Mm-hmm. So understanding our human evolution, and then we will understand how AI can help in a complex world like ours, mm-hmm. and where it can actually contribute to deal with organizational priorities better.
So what I'm hearing from you is that complexity, it will be addressed, and also the understanding of ourselves, as Damian mentioned before, being who are you as a human being in relationship to the business environment that is being shaped with AI right now. Great. And Adriana, would you like to add anything? What is your take around AI and business environment from your perspective?
When you ask why should the leader be interested in this topic, I think about two different reasons. Why is in terms of being curious, how is the presence of AI shaping the needs of our environment in terms of needs of our customers, how our societies are shaped, how do we think differently about life? So what is changing that we need to be aware of to be wiser as an organization creating its products and services. The other way is also to look into this is also how can AI be my partner and a collaborator in helping me do business in a wiser way or become more effective with less effort. So these are like the two takes that we also want to address here in the program. And for me, the two key reasons why should I be curious as a leader about it? How is it changing my environment, and how can it be in service of what we are trying to create as an organization?
Great. Thank you. Damian, anything to add to that?
I think really probably the only thing to add to that is just to be aware of how the culture of an organization is shaped by the leaders and everybody within the organization. And as that sort of famous quote, brains shape cultures, cultures shape brains, brains shape cultures, cultures shape brains, ad infinitum. And so it'd be interesting for a leader to really think about, okay, well, now we also have artificial intelligence involved in the shaping of our cultures in our organizations. So how does that affect us? How does that affect our brains? And how does that affect the culture in which we work in? So I think this cultural aspect of it as well, culture eats strategy for breakfast, as Peter Drucker famously said, is this idea that if you are interested in the culture of your organization and how it works, then you should also be interested in the technologies that culture uses and how that's impacting upon the culture, not just of the business environment, of the organization itself, but the business environment around you.
Right. So, Judith, you mentioned at the beginning of the call that, part of, this program, it's facilitation of the conversation and asking big questions that leaders should be pondering or thinking about or reflecting on. And as we know, sometimes, people come into this facilitation process and they tell us, give us the answer. We don't want questions. Why are you asking us questions? You should know about this. So if I was the leader who's listening to this and say, okay, I really want to sign up for this. I want to learn about AI. I'm completely conscious that this is shaping my reality. And I need to know more. And I'm going to go there and be asked a bunch of questions. What is the value of that from your perspective?
I think there is always a need to understand more about it. And I would say with the program, we will meet some of that need. So there will be, of course, content that will be provided in order to provide more knowledge around the topic. Mm-hmm. But our main objective is actually to come up at the end of the program with more questions compared to the beginning. So if there is an interest to get all the responses on all questions that a person might come into the program, I have to say that probably that expectation cannot be met, because our ideal outcome is that because of the conversation with other colleagues, with other people in that conversational space, there might be actually new perspectives that might help emerge new questions to go dive into.
Right. Yeah. And we know that as coaches, I was just kind of putting myself in a position of a leader, because when you facilitate a conversation, there's always something new from the collective space that pops up that you can then learn from. And Adriana, I know that you love this space of facilitation and growing and steering and moving. What would you say to this?
Are you sure you want to ask me? I'm never going to stop talking.
I'll interrupt you.
So you just kind of say, okay, you're done. It's like when you ask this question, for me, it's like, come on, people, you have to understand, like, asking questions is a critical skill for leadership today. Everything today, like, our environment is becoming more complex and more uncertain every day. And there is more and more information that we need into consideration. And we feel more and more, overwhelmed with everything that is happening, and that with this request, that you have to be wise and smart and make the right decision in this environment. So this building the capacity and the awareness that actually facilitation skills and being a facilitator as a leader is something that we have no choice but to learn. And being the space of not knowing and asking questions, in search for the right question is something that we really need to do. And I think if we want to bring this back, to AI as well, we all have different experiences and we all have different perspectives. And we bring that into the room and into the program. Whoever shows up, we bring a unique experience, we bring a unique lens, a unique view of the world. And by bringing this conversation together and harvesting the wisdom of whoever showed up, we are going to become more wiser and smarter around how is AI relevant and how can we work together with it in service of life, whatever we want to create.
Yeah. We love that question, service to life. There you go. You were very short.
It takes a lot of self-regulation, so please be proud on me.
I'm very, very proud of you. So before we move into the conversation around AI and decision-making, do we want to say anything else around the AI business for our listeners? Just, we covered the topics of how the content is going to be delivered. It's going to be piece of information and learning. At the same time, it's going to be dialogue, conversation, harvesting, facilitation, when we collectively share the wisdom and come to conclusions together. And then everybody in the program can also draw out the conclusions and application to their own business landscape in their organization. So I feel this is very powerful for leaders. Anything you would love to add on to that before we move into the decision making? No, happy.
I don't
Okay.
think so. No, great, yeah.
So
Great.
I would love AI to make all my decisions.
That's not what you said at the last workshop,
I know. I've changed my mind. I'm so tired of making decisions and choices. It's enough already. I need somebody to tell me what I need to do and make all the decisions, for me. Is that possible? Is that good usage of AI in the decision making? Tell me.
Well, I let me comment on this. So I think the big question is really what kind of decisions are we making or do we make? And where is a good use of AI in helping us in making decisions? And also, where do we as humans want to add value in the decision-making process? So as we said at the beginning, I think it's very much a combination and a reflection about in what case AI might even take better decisions because it can analyze data much faster in a much more accurate way compared to human beings. And where is it where AI cannot take decisions for us? So sorry to say, Zoran, I don't think it's possible that all decisions will be made by AI, but what is a good use of the technology there to actually produce something which is better compared to the use of only AI or only human decision making?
Great. I like that. I like that we can, as humans, add value to the decision making. And at the same time, we can look into where can AI add value in our decision making processes. Great. So how is then AI impacting human decision making? What would you say on that?
So I think AI is already impacting us because it is present, it's influencing us. I think, Damian, you have a couple of examples if you want to share.
Yes, well, it depends on, as Judith said, it depends on what examples are we actually giving over, what examples of decision making are we giving over to AI. I think there's quite a pertinent one, even in the news today in the UK, there was a pertinent example, topical example of people sending in their passport photographs to an automated artificial intelligence system that's able to find out whether that photo is appropriate or not. And it seems that what's happened from a piece of research that's just been taking place is that if you are dark-skinned and if you are a woman, then that you are twice as likely that your photo will be refused for the passport. Now, what's dependent, when we look at this particular example, what's happening is there may be bias that's fed into the system depending on the kind of data that's put into the system regarding the kind of labels that we have about ethical backgrounds or racial backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds or racial backgrounds. Or it could be that the data isn't complete enough or diverse enough that's put in there in the first place. So AI decision making is very, very dependent upon the quality of the data that goes into it and its ability to make connections between that data and be able to have a sense of discernment between what it's looking at. So you can have these kind of biases that then can be fed, the cultural biases or ethical biases that can be fed into the AI that can then continue or even put that even deeper into a structure or a system or an organization, and can put those biases even more systematic into the system. So this is a very, very simple idea of how it affects what would be previously done through a human decision. A very simple and topical example that was in the news today, actually, just this morning. But there are loads and loads of different ways that we could look at this, particularly if we look at the world of finance now, where artificial intelligence is used extensively to be able to look at markets, and whoever's got the fastest artificial intelligence that can look at all the markets and make the decisions most quickly about what to buy and what to sell, etc., then those people will always rise to the top. So again, it comes down to the speed and the accuracy can be great. But if we're looking at AI decision making, we are constantly looking at a system which is sequential in its thinking, it's algorithmic and it's analytic in its thinking, and it's also convergent in its thinking. It's trying to get to an answer very, very quickly. And that's a very specific kind of decision making, whereas we might see that human decision making, on the other hand, is something which can actually be much more divergent in its thinking, is able to see the relationships between much wider factors that seemingly might seem unrelated to an AI, but to a human mind, they might be able to observe that relation and see what's really going on. And so we have these different forms of thinking, if you like, that are present in Of course, human beings can do really good sequential thinking and algorithmic thinking as well. That's why we make great coders. That's why we created AI, because we're really good at that kind of thinking. And it's our thinking that's created the AI in the first place. But we have another form of thinking, and we haven't developed a technology yet that can reflect that other form of thinking. It's often associated with the left and right brain in psychology. But we have this other form of thinking which we can bring in decision-making, which can read context and can take perspectives. And the reading of context and perspectives is something so far AI with its sequential form of decision-making is not able to bring into the decision-making process.
So I should wait with delegating all my decisions. I thought my life will be so simple. I mean, we live in a very complex environment, right, Adriana? The business is so complicated. It's very complex, with a lot of things to consider. So I thought maybe, I can take this layer of complexity and just delegate this. Adriana, anything to say on that?
I was thinking, there are so many examples, and there are two parts of, I think, delegating decision-making to AI. And I also must say that I became much more curious and more awake or alert to the types and ways of decisions, how we are making decisions, like in the world. And there is one thing, and that is that we are delegating our decisions to AI because it's, let's call it like data processing, like computational capacity, because it can process more information and more data faster. So it can kind of help us make sense of data faster. But there is another part of the human decision-making process and our relationship with the decisions and choices that we make. And that has to do with our emotional nature. Like how we make decisions. We are not only objective, we are very subjective in how we make decisions. And then, there is the complexity of data and information, and then there is the complexity of human relationships. And if we bring this back to leadership and to the organizational context, one thing is thinking about to what extent do I delegate my decisions to AI as a person, although it's a big topic enough in itself. But when we bring that, it is, But when we bring that to an organizational environment and we think about, tens, hundreds and thousands of people working together in the same organization to create value together, and then collecting the information and processing the information together and trying to make sense out of it together, there are so many layers in there. And for me, somehow the biggest curiosity for me in this relationship, how do we collaborate with AI in our decision making, is really like, where is the edge of what AI can learn about human nature to take it into consideration in what it offers, and to what extent do we really give away our power to choose and delegate it to AI. And just really, I think a lot about, where are my own personal boundaries in this? And then, as organizations and as society, where is the edge of how far are we willing to go? And then another intriguing question is it really going to be our choice? This woohoo AI, it's learning. So... yeah, I want to be very real and pragmatic around this. It has a lot to do with complexity and has a lot to do with uncertainty. It has a lot to do with learning from experiences. It has a lot to do with our capacity to foresee and, think about the future, and also who do we become together. So, yeah.
That's a big question that I think we should keep for another podcast. That question that you opened right now, we can go another 10 hours of recording. So
shift delete. Should I rerun my reflection?
No. I think it's good for audience to listen, because it's a very important one. Where are our boundaries? Where do we stop? Damian, you want to comment on that, right?
I think it's a really important question, and it is a 10-hour podcast at least, because it calls into question the idea of us having a sense of control and autonomy, a sense of free will, a sense of self-determination, which for most people they would consider to be sacred in their lives. I mean, the idea that you can choose what it is that you want to do, and that you have a way in which you can influence the world and you get a feedback loop from the world, from the decisions that you as an individual are making. And then that becomes part of the growth of your personality. Whereas if you give those decisions over to an AI, then that growth process, that feedback loop, that growth process of going into the world to develop your own personality, where you're making your own decisions and you're then seeing the influence that you have upon the world, and then that again is feeding back into you to develop your personality. This is how human beings have developed for millennia as part of our evolution. So what happens if we give those decisions in our lives over about how we work out, how we use our companies and organizations, how we use our resources of the world, how do we create a sustainable future? But perhaps also what comes into decision making, and this is a bit of an overlap with the dilemmas perhaps as well, is that, you know, we tend to want to make decisions about things that are not just around creating business and creating well-being for the world, but also things that are much more ethical and moral decisions about how we treat the planet, how we treat each other, and those kind of decisions. Again, are we willing to give those kind of decisions away to an artificial intelligence that will make them for us? And how do we know whether it's going to make the best decision for us? I mean, how do we know we can make the best decision? But that's that leading edge of us, which is so exciting. You know, that moving into the unknown is the bit which means that we are growing and we are developing in that way. But these are great questions. Yeah.
That's a great question. So it's a segue to the last topic of our conversation, which is AI and dilemmas, because we do have dilemmas around this. You know, we need to kind of be mindful enough and considerate enough and open enough to have these open conversations like this one today and look into the dilemmas. So what are the dilemmas that can arise? You know, you mentioned few. What are social dilemmas that, you know, we might face with the AI?
Yeah, well, I think we mentioned on one hand, we have the interest of developing technology because technology enables us to do certain things. On the other hand, we want to keep the control over everything. So this is a dilemma. And what do we do with dilemma? We have to try to reconcile the dilemma. So how do we go about it? So I think there is a number of ethical dilemmas. If we think about, just as an example, if we think about self-driving cars, right? And this is, again, this interconnection between decision-making and dilemmas. If the car is going to crash and it has to decide whether it crashes against a tree and therefore the person driving is going to die, or it crashes against pedestrians and therefore the pedestrian is going to die and the driver is not going to die. So how is the AI taking that decision, which is also connected to a human need to explain the decisions that are made. So the need of explainability, which is a challenge still in AI, where certain decisions are made without us really understanding how that decision has been made.
Oh, I love the example that you used. And it is very interesting, because part of us, we need to justify our decision-making process. You know, what do you do in that situation when you have a self-driving car? How does the car make a decision what to do, who to protect, right?
And how would the human decide in that situation, right? As we said, the human decision-making is already a mystery. And then we look into how the AI is taking that decision and we compare, how would we do it? And each individual is different anyway. So there would be different value system. There would be different ways to go about that decision. And still then we assume that AI should be totally clear and linear and consistent and explainable.
Damian, anything to add to that AI and dilemmas? You're laughing, so I'm curious about your contribution here.
Yes. I think that this is again, we could do a 10-hour podcast on this because this is such a huge topic. It's just enormous. There are so many different ethical dilemmas or social dilemmas that we could look at and we could list. I think probably what's interesting to think about is well, one of the ones which comes up, which is probably the most common one, is okay, if artificial intelligence and the kind of technologies that we have are becoming much more prevalent in our business environments and our workplaces, then that requires the human to change the kind of jobs that they do, the kind of work that they do. And then we're not exactly sure what the human being will be doing then. At what point will the human being be involved in decision making? How will the human being make a living, if you like? And one of the ways, one of the things which we, one of my sort of specialisms is to look at emotional health and motivation and how well-being and motivation are kind of combined. And one of the things that we understand from that, looking at the last 100 years of psychological knowledge, is that the human being needs to feel like they have challenges in life. They have a sense of control and autonomy. They have a sense of status that's recognized. They have a sense of competence and achievement, and various other different things we can connect to our communities. And when these kind of emotional needs are met, we're very motivated to get these met. Then we tend to have a sense of well-being. But if we can't develop a sense of competence and achievement by having a difficult job to do, if we can't develop a sense of status by having a difficult job to do that other people recognize us for doing, if we can't have a sense of control and autonomy in our lives, then our well-being will be impacted amongst other needs. So we have to be careful how much we're giving away and how much that actually impacts upon our well-being. We go to work not just to earn our money, but because it has a sense of meaning for us, because it has a sense that it fulfills us in one way or another. And we then have to look at, well, how can life become more fulfilling? This excites me as well, because I think that this is the, if you like, the golden part of AI, which could be tricky. If we end up optimizing the human for the market with AI, then we've kind of lost this gold. But if we're going to end up optimizing AI to create a better future for the human, then we might end up with all of us having more meaningful lives, all of us doing less sequential, less algorithmic analytical jobs, and actually starting to exercise the other part of our brain, which is to do with relationships, connections, developing meaning, looking for the deeper context in things, and self-development and progression. So I think this is one of the wonderful things about AI, where it might take us, if we navigate this tricky little period that we're in at the moment really well. So, there are dilemmas there around that. I mean, just to give you a little example, I was working with a really large shipping company a few years ago, and one of the captains there, who was an older guy, had said to me, well, now the ship is, that we have technology and satellite links and artificial intelligence, which is working on the ship to make sure that it's going exactly the right speed in order to use the least amount of fuel, in order to be the most efficient, in order to be aware of the weather, et cetera, in order to get the absolute maximum efficiency, which is what AI does. But from his point of view, he'd lived his entire life making those decisions himself, along with the crew members and the top four on board. So he was then, saying, well, what do? Do I just wear the hat now? I'm there for an emergency, obviously, but he's just wearing the hat now. So it's that for him, there was a loss of sense of meaning in that. There was a loss of sense of meaning of what it was to be the captain of a ship. And that's an important thing to bear in mind, that human beings are fulfilled and get a sense of meaning from these kind of roles, which we may end up giving over to AI in one way or another.
So we're coming towards the end of this wonderful conversation. And what you share, Damian, is really, really important for me personally, because I'm always with the notion of what is the most profound and uplifting potential in our relationship with AI. So how can we reach as a humanity that state when the AI can become the ally and not deprive us of our humanity in any way, but actually enrich our humanity? And also, you mentioned something very interesting and important for our audience, is that now is this pivotal moment when the leaders do have to take responsibility for this. Now is the time when we need to give it focus, we need to give it attention, we need to be mindful around it instead of just oblivious and walking around our life. Oh, look at this happened and that happened with AI, and then this happened with AI, and then suddenly that happened, and I don't have any clue what's going on. So I think that one of the most important things is to be on this topic, to be mindful, to be informed, to be in the dialogue, to be in conversation, to be educated, and to follow it through this complex environment. So to to wrap up this conversation today, if you guys think about the most positive impact on AI, in our lives, that's something that AI can be gift for, what would you like to leave our audience with?
For me personally, I think what Damian just said, he pictured it really nicely, to have AI take part of our activities that are more process driven and free up the space, because it's a matter also of space and mental space, to have human beings contribute more also on the creative aspects, on that relational aspect. I think the emotional intelligence and that human touch in whatever we do needs to be more and more on the radar, and we need to dedicate more time. And if we have AI that is actually taking care of a lot of other stuff, I think that would be for me the ideal situation.
Wonderful. Adriana or Damian?
Yeah, and I would say the same sort of thing, really. I think, I think the most important thing to realize is that artificial intelligence is inevitable. There's no point thinking about it as though it's a great evil and we should resist it at all costs. There's no point walking around, like you said, just not being aware of it and just it happening. What we really need to do is embrace it, understand it, and try to make the best use of it in our world, keeping the human being at the center of our systems, and optimizing the future, like we said earlier, through the use of these technologies. And this is what programs really about, beginning and trying to get people to engage with these ideas in a much deeper way, and then look at how they can apply them in their everyday lives and in their workplaces as leaders or as people within their workplaces. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. And Adriana?
For me, when I think about it, I don't see artificial intelligence as something outside of us, like humans and AI as something separate. For me, AI is, we created it. It is, in many, many different ways, like AI is the embodiment of the amazingness of humans, like we have created something that demonstrates capacities beyond what any single individual, can do now. But it's the embodiment of knowledge and wisdom and human aspirations, like to create and to impact and to make the world a better place. And in that sense, what I would like to leave people with, really, I hope that we have seeded some curiosity. We have seeded the sense of importance and relevance for people to engage with this topic, because engaging with the theme of AI is really engaging with human potential and engaging with wisdom. And like pushing and expanding the boundaries of what we can create together, like as humans and in partnership with the technology that we created.
So, whatever our relationship with AI is, as I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, sometimes I personally get really worried when I look into this and I'm like, oh my God, this is beyond my ability to comprehend. This is growing too quickly and it's taking over my life. So I get worried and concerned. That can be one direction relationship. Or I can get very excited by saying, oh my God, look at my son who is 13 years old and his relationship to the AI and how he uses it as an integral part of his everyday life, and he develops relationship, which is very exciting and very out there. Two, philosophers, thinkers, and technological experts who are thinking about how can we use this AI to do exactly what Damian mentioned in this podcast: liberate human creativity, step more into the right brain of ourselves and have space to actualize our own potential in collaboration with AI. So whatever your entry point into this conversation was, we hope that you got more inspired. We hope that you got more curious about the topic. We hope that certain little lights inside of you, like ting, 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 got lit up and you're like, okay, now maybe it's the time for me to pay attention to this, especially if you're in leadership position. Meaning, if you're leading within the organization, or you're leading your own business, or you're leading yourself, it doesn't really matter what kind of leader you are, especially if you're leading. This is a very relevant and important topic for you nowadays. So we want to thank you for listening and being with us today. We want to extend a big hug and thanks to Judith and Adriana and you, Damian, for joining the TNM Unplugged podcast today. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your research, and everything that you are. And bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you. Thanks.
Bye.